Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Forest Rangers, what are your downright unexplainable stories? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm not a forest ranger, but I'm a soil conservationist for the USDA. I spend a lot of time out looking at cropland and CRP, Conservation Reserve Program prairie restorations. Needless to say, it's not uncommon for me to find myself miles from the nearest road. One time, I was out looking at CRP in a heavily wooded area of my county. I was probably half a mile or so off the road on a trail when I came upon a small clearing with what appeared to be an abandoned playground and school bus. There was a rusty swing set and a huge rainbow merry-go-round. Alone, this would have creeped me out, but I was truly terrified to see the merry-go-round spinning extremely fast. There was no wind in the clearing, so somebody, or something, had to have been making it spin. I called out, and nobody answered. I turned around and left. I figured it may have been an old school, so I took a look at our old maps and asked our archaeologist to look into it. We couldn't find anything about it. I haven't gone back. I told my boss he could go look at it. Not sure if he ever did. I'm not a superstitious person, but this made the hair on my neck stand up. I own land in the mountains and camp there sometimes. One night, I was awake around 4 a.m. lying still in my hammock looking at the stars. Then, disturbingly close by, I heard the unmistakable sounds of something big with a big bladder urinate. I could clearly hear the sound change as the hard, dry dirt became wet, then a small puddle, then a muddy puddle as the stream went on and on. The most common animals large enough to pee that long and loud are deer and coyotes, and there are also bobcats and rarely wolves and bears. Never figured out what it actually was. I fell back asleep and woke when the sun was well up. No prints or telltale puddle to be found. One that went unexplained for several years until I saw it happen was why I was hearing the sound of a baby screaming during the night. Turns out that frogs being eaten by snakes sound like crying babies. But the reality and the imagined source of the sound are pretty freaky. I was a ranger for Glacier National Park in northern Montana. Awesome. We got a call around 3 a.m.ish for a camper in distress near our post, but would require a 45-minute hike through some pretty rocky terrain to get there. So we geared up and started hiking. Me and my partner were about 30 minutes into our hike when I just get a gut feeling that something isn't right. Keep in mind it's pitch black, only using headlamps in the middle of grizzly territory. We're about 10 minutes out, and we start to hear the sound of a baby crying, so we kick it into high gear and start shouting and moving faster until I noticed something odd and my gut completely dropped. The sound of the child crying was played on a loop. It was the same cry over and over again. I told my partner to stop and listen, to prove I wasn't going crazy. He was a new hire, and I just saw all the color on the kid's face vanish when he realized also. We decided to hightail it out of there, fearing for our lives and the unknown. Never got another call of a stranded camper after we left. I still get chills telling the story. It's a pretty creepy story from one of my favorite national parks in the country, so thanks. I am not a ranger, but my neighbor used to be one for the National Park Service. He told me 2 stories that were eerie. My favorite is the time he was making the rounds at a park in the Appalachian Mountains. It was a gorgeous night with a bright moon, clear skies, and a nice 75 degrees. Anyway, 30 minutes into a shift, and he felt something liquid tap on his shoulder. Even though it's a clear night, he didn't think anything of it, because it could be an animal doing its business up in the tree. Anyways, he wiped it away, only to notice that the liquid was sticky. He flashed his lights on his fingers and saw blood, which startled him, but not as much as what he saw next. When he shined his light up the tree, way up top was the carcass of a mangled male deer. Its body was totally ripped up and twisted. Obviously, seeing this is creepy as heck, but what really bothered him was that the tree the deer was hanging from was really tall and difficult to climb. The first 20 feet of the tree had no branches, and the deer carcass was maybe 100 feet up in the tree. When he went back the next day, he was able to verify that. I argued that it was a cougar or some other mountain lion. However, he didn't think a cougar would stash their prey that high up. Also, he told me that there were no cougars in that park, let alone in the state. Wildlife Bio, who works with forest rangers, My most unexplainable story was the woman who tried to pet a bear because it was wearing a radio collar and she thought it was a pet bear that someone owned. I just can't even begin to explain her logic. Whoa. I watch a dude on YouTube, or at least I did when my alcoholism was raging. He goes around with a metal detector and he digs shit up, coins and bottle caps mostly. He says he's always wary of strange-looking clearings in the middle of nowhere. He's always afraid that it means pot, and he isn't as worried about getting shot anymore, not these days, but he's terrified of their old booby traps. Not a ranger, but I went camping on a mountain with a friend. We had a fire going, and we were just chatting and messing with the fire when I heard a very faint sound that distracted me from the conversation. I told my friend to hush up for a second, and we both listened closely. We could hear a woman singing in the distance what sounded like a really old medieval melody. We couldn't make out what it was because she was singing in another language. We were far and away from any other campsite, as we like to camp in our own spots away from anything that could potentially have other people. Creeped us out, but what makes it freaky is I ended up posting pictures of our camp on Facebook, and another friend recognized the location and asked if I heard anything weird. I said, "Why do you ask?" He went on to explain how him and another of our mutual friends were nearby that campsite on a different night with one of their dogs, and they heard a woman crying as she was coming down the road that passed by the site. They decided to check on her to see if she was all right, but when they got to the road and called out to her, there was no response and the crying immediately stopped. They thought it was strange, but decided to head back to the camp. When they got back, they found their dog convulsing by the fire and foaming at the mouth. They grabbed him and got him in their car and started hightailing it down the mountain. He said the dog went limp in his arms on the way down, and he thought it died. But once they reached the bottom of the mountain, the dog woke up immediately and acted like nothing happened. They immediately assumed there was something evil in that area. When he was telling me this story, I turned white as a ghost, and once I finished, I explained what my other friend and I heard near our camp. It really freaked me out, because my buddy with the dog ended up going up to the mountain with me and showed me where everything went down, which happened to be exactly where I was hearing the singing the night I went camping. Not a ranger. I was a long-time concessionaire employee in the national parks though. I worked seasonally for over 14 years and worked at 9 different national parks. One unexplained thing people bring up all the time is people disappearing in national parks. To me, it doesn't seem like such a mystery. Most national parks are gigantic, wild, and rugged. Getting lost in them is pretty easy. Staying lost isn't so hard either. Many tourists are pretty stupid when it comes to safety in the outdoors. People literally walk off cliffs, taking selfies. I saw this on a documentary about some forest rangers, and it still gives me chills to think about. In a national park in some hard-to-reach, rocky, secluded climb was a camp known for weird shit happening. One of them is when the group was camping in the middle of the night when the most unusual demonic sounds came bellowing across a gorge. The campers could tell that it was 2 different creatures going back and forth, and the sounds and frequencies were impossible to be human or any known animal in the area. If I'm not mistaken, this happened on different occasions, and there was an actual recording taken, which is really freaky to hear. In a separate occasion in that same spot, while sleeping inside their camp structure consisting of logs and sticks, they heard the unmistakable sound of their camp being thrashed and ravaged by very large, strong animals, which they assumed to be bears or another animal. Fearing for their lives and waiting it out until morning, they were shocked to find the camp completely untouched. The final story at the same location is in the middle of the day. While sitting for lunch, a horizontal beam of white light almost resembling a fluorescent bulb gently floats across the campsite before stopping and disappearing. They eventually decommissioned the campsite and I believe hid the location. I'm not telling it as eerie as it conveys, and I wish I could find what it was from, but I believe it was a documentary with a story about Tom Messick Sr. and other forest mysteries, which are all a huge trip. I was not a ranger, but worked for an environmental nonprofit that contracted out with the Parks Service. I was in a Mantes-la-Selle National Forest on a fuels reduction project, working pretty far down a long ATV trail that was accessed by an incredibly steep switchback. It was the last day of the project, and our project partners in the Park Service had been schlepping gear out all day. One of them was an absolute gargantuan man, probably about 6'5", with red ginger hair, but darker, like mixed with rust. He had been helping me with a lot of the heavy swamping, clearing the chopped up debris from my chainsaw for the duration of the month-long contract. I was hiking back at the end of the day alone, like an idiot. The rest of my crew was half a mile or so behind me. I like to push myself on hikes to keep myself in shape. I was coming around a wide bend in the trail, heavy foliage to my left, when I heard a rustling coming from behind the impassable wall. I slowed down and craned my neck. I'm pretty tall myself, 6'3", and saw what looked to be the shaggy mop of my project partner through the small gaps in foliage, and then it moved. When it moved, I could see there was a whole lot more fur than just a shaggy mop, and also that this hair was covering something much, much larger than even my juttin' of a coworker. I saw it begin to take one slow, quick step and decided not to stick around any longer. Ran till my lungs burst and practically crawled my way back up the switchbacks to our trucks, hid in one of the trailers till the rest of my crew showed up. I asked if anyone had seen anything on their way back. No one had. I still don't know what I saw. I tell myself it was an elk. Makes sense, given the season and location, but I never knew an elk to walk on two legs. Alright, big question. So with technology and mapping, and there's still thousands and millions of acres that are probably unexplored, do you think it's possible that there is a Bigfoot or Yeti type species still in existence? Not mine, but my math teacher used to be one, and one time a guy he knew really well and always went to my teacher's park just went missing, and about 11 months later, they found his car at the bottom of a lake next to a dam, but they never found his body. Not a ranger, but have been camping all my life, 39 years, and my family 30 years prior to that. Same park mainly, love it there. One trip out with family when I was 10, every night I had a dream about a cave off one of the trails. Every night, same dream. Nothing bad happened, just me walking to it. I asked my family. No one knows anything about it. Finally, I asked the park rangers. 12 years prior to that, they had a cave off of the small trail I said it was, exactly off the same small bend on the trail, same landmarks. They leveled as much as they could and filled in the rest of the way because of how close it was to the camp and bears were using it. They wanted to avoid issues. No literature about the cave, not on any maps. Never talk about it so people didn't try to dig anything out or get hurt looking for anything. I'm not superstitious, but I do believe the mountain talked to me, that I was given information about the area for whatever reason. I believe I'm connected to it and always will be. I was 12 at the time, 1998, and my friends and I decided to go on a hike in a rural area in Nova Scotia, Canada. We packed lunches and set forth up a really big hill and into the woods. We are subdivision kids. We only play in each other's yards or backyard, and sometimes the wooded area between our houses if there was any. Roughly half an hour in, we notice a path that looked like a road that four-wheelers might have made. As we continue on, there's like 8 of us, ages ranging between 8 and 12, we see a wide area in the woods that was made into a camping site. Beds were made out of fresh brush. There was a fire pit with stacked wood, just a really cool spot. We thought maybe Boy Scouts set this up as training exercises or something. So, we settled down and eat our snacks, still admiring these perfect beds. We were laughing and carrying on, coming up with silly names on what to call this place. We knew this would be a great place to hang out. It was late afternoon, sun still shining, and my friends wanted to go home. I told them I was going to stick around and see what else I could find in the area. They tried to get me to come back with them, but I told them I'd soon be leaving after looking around. I laid on the grass and brush bed and looked up in the sky, seeing the bright blue sky with very few clouds and a light breeze. I was so relaxed. I felt so proud to have helped discover something. Then, I heard a branch snap. I sit up and start to look around. Nothing out of the ordinary. I see trees upon staggered trees until I look far into the distance, something hanging from a tree. It's far away, and at 5'9" and 170 pounds, I was a fat kid, though I did play a lot of sports, so husky? I figured I'd be bigger than whatever else is in the woods. Stupidly, I get up and walk towards it. I still can't make out what it is, but as I keep walking, I start to audibly let out some nervous laughter. I get closer to it, roughly 80-ish feet away, and it looks like a body. I freeze. Now I'm panicking. In my eyes playing tricks on me? There's no effing way that's what I think it is. For whatever reason, I'll never know. Uncharacteristically of me, I continue to walk towards it. My heart is racing and my legs are becoming weaker and weaker. I get close enough to actually see it is in fact a body hanging from a tree. I freak the F out and run the other way. As I'm running like my effing life depends on it, my mind is racing faster than my legs. I run and run and run until finally I catch up with the others. They ask me why I was running, and I'm trying so hard to catch my breath. They're all asking what's wrong, and I'm trying so hard to catch my breath I actually fell over. They all gathered round me trying to help and frantically asked questions, while my friend, my age, was crying. In between my breaths, I told him I saw a body hanging. Now everyone is crying. We sat down, far away from the campsite, and I'm describing what happened. What I will never forget for as long as I live was how effing gross the face looked. Has anyone seen Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? The scene where Robin's father, in the contraption high above, burnt and decayed? That's what it looked like. Told my parents, they didn't believe me. By this time it was dark, and there was no way in hell I was going up there that night. I told them I'd show them tomorrow morning. I didn't sleep at all. All I could think of was that horrible looking face. My mind wouldn't stop racing, thinking about it over and over. Finally, it was light out, and I woke my parents up and got ready to show them. We walked back to the place and found the brush beds. I showed them where I laid and where I started looking. I couldn't see where it was, so I told them to follow me as I tried remembering which direction it was in. I kept walking, whimpering, waiting to see the body again. I didn't. It was gone. Was it an illusion, a hallucination? Was it a real body? I guess we'll never know. But, pretty wild. Not a ranger or anything, but where I live there's a big forest. Me and my friends go into this forest a lot, and it's fun and quite safe. There's a trail too, and an abandoned mini putting place too. Anyways, one night we decided to go into the forest, and while we were walking on the trail that leads to the inside of the forest, I thought I heard noises. I asked my friend to stop his music so I can listen better, and the noises were just a lot of howling and screeching. At this point on the trail, there was no forest on our right-hand side, only our left-hand side, and it was down a hill. We thought it was just dogs, but before we made a left down the trail into the forest, I remember that in the direction those noises were coming from, there were 0 houses at all. One of my friends always refused to go anywhere near that forest during the nighttime because of a bad gut feeling. He wasn't with us that day, but we decided to trust his gut and get out of there. We left and went into a neighborhood not too far away in the opposite direction of the forest, and when we were standing outside of the school in that neighborhood, we began to hear the noises again coming from the forest direction. The forest was out of sight and far away at this point, but it still freaked us out. Now, I'm not a forest ranger, but I have lived in a forest my whole life, and there's something that just doesn't sit right with me here. Don't call me crazy. My entire childhood, I've lived in the forest with my family. Out of all of them, I'm the only one who loves to go into the woods. I'm drawn to it. I take hour and mile-long walks alone sometimes, but usually I go with a friend. I always bring a weapon, even though I'm confident that there's nothing there that will hurt me. Here, there is no dangerous animals that I've seen with the human eye, but I have come in close contact with things that even I can't explain. When I was 9 years old, I was having a birthday party in the middle of October. It was warm, the perfect day to go trek through the woods with some buddies. We started to head through my yard and towards the tree line, but then we stopped. One of my friends spotted something in the trees, a person, an animal. Nothing around here would have that white of a coat. This thing stood on 2 legs, so it couldn't be a cotton-tailed deer. There was something out there, but none of us wanted to figure that out, so we ran. When I was 11, I was out on the rooftop gazing up at the stars and looking down at my phone occasionally. Suddenly, a sound started echoing around me. I thought it was an owl, but then the sound turned more into some sort of mountain lion or bobcat in distress sound. The noise changed many times, making different animal sounds. Once, even screaming like a girl, a fox maybe? I was too frightened, dialing everyone I knew while I was curled up in a ball against the side of the house. When I was 13, I came in contact with that white thing at the base of my neighbor's driveway. Never again would I ever peer around at night. Later that day, I heard some sort of moose sound, but moose don't live around here. My entire life, I've heard stories from one of my brothers about a Revolutionary War soldier circling the house, and once I saw it, but only once. That was it. I always felt safe because of it. It's sort of protecting me. Call me crazy, but nothing will keep me out of those woods. Nothing it has thrown at me so far, that is. I was a ranger for a bit out in Denali National Park. Denali in the winter isn't really a camping destination, but you have the occasional kook who wants to try it out, and more often than not, we're the ones who have to rescue them, or at least what's left. It was nearing the end of January, beginning of 2009. We got a call about a fire out in the bush, campfire probably, and expected from campers. But the ranger we sent to check on the campers never returned, so out I went. It was only half an hour hike, but as I neared, I started to worry. Ranger's intuition, I guess. The ambient noises all seemed to go away, even the wind had died. Only as I got closer to the site did I notice the tracks. It was a bear, a big one. You work up there long enough, you can easily tell a small animal from large based off the prints. I wasn't wrong. There was a tent, half standing. It looked like it had been peeled open like a tuna can. Blood trailed from the entrance about 15 feet away. The bodies stank already. An acrid smell of burnt hair and flesh. You smell it once, you never forget. I stood about 10 feet away and fumbled for my phone. When I looked up, there it was. The biggest bear I'd ever seen. Fear incarnate. Its paws were shimmery with blood. Hell knows where it even came from so fast and quiet. It scooped a huge pile of snow and dirt onto the bodies. Watching it act, I only then realized they were on top of a now extinguished campfire. The bear stood up, 15 feet tall at least, and stomps towards me. I couldn't even move. You don't even know fear. 3 feet away, it leans down face to face. Through the stench of its flesh-rotten breath and terror pinning me to the ground, I noticed one thing. It has a hat on. A familiar hat. It's a ranger's hat, much like mine. Probably belonged to the guy I was sent to find, God bless him. The bear raised a claw and points back at the campfire. Then, it uses the same claw to poke me in the chest to emphasize its words. Yes, its words. Maybe it was the fear, a hallucination of sheer terror, but the bear spoke only 2 words, with a voice made of growling, endless horror. Only you. Then it stood up and turned around. The sheer relief of watching it leave caused me to faint, and when I woke up, I was back at the lodge, lying on a medical cot. I told my story to everybody, and only the newer ranger dismissed it as hysteria. Oh, he just got too close to a bear, and his mind freaked out, they thought. The older rangers, the lifers, they all just nodded in silent acceptance. Gotta be careful, one of them said. Nobody ever spoke of it again. Alright. I'm an environmental monitor for oil companies up in Alberta, Canada. A consultant and I went to this old well pad way out in the bush. We were looking for water wells that were there but not recorded, so they had to be visually found and marked on the GPS. We went through this trail, and when we found a few, we decided to come back later and look for more. A week later, we came back, and on the trail, there were trees about 1 to 2 inches bent down over the trail. Not totally weird, but what was is that at the bottom of the trees, something twisted the tree like a wet dish rag and then bent the trees down. If they just pushed the trees down, then they would spring back up. Whatever it was smart enough to know that the twisted trees would stay down. No animals could do this. Only logical explanation was that maybe a little tornado touched down on that specific spot and then lifted back up, and whatever it was really strong to twist trees like that. Or it was Bigfoot warning us to stay away from there, LOL. Either way, it was odd. Not a ranger, but back in the late 80s, before this job was done by computers, I took a summer job at a fire watchtower in Campo Santo National Forest. My literal first day on the job, I had to deal with some dumbasses setting off fireworks, and it was all downhill from there. I'm talking a summer of being creeped on by some government agency, a massive forest fire inching closer every day, and some unsettling stories about the last person at my tower. Anyway, the scary part was on my 79th day there, when I had to go take a leak and came back to find my save would load because those dongers at Campo Santo left a game-killing bug in Firewatch that still isn't fixed 6 years later.